welcome to the Unknown Webcast. This is just a bit of a trigger warning.
Just a bit.
For those who believe words are more injurious than sticks and stones, I really am so conservative, I can't turn left even when I'm driving. In addition to giving trigger warnings to our viewers, Ron Hensel and I both drink coffee for your protection. This week, founder and president of Lifewise Academy, Joel Penton, joins us to wax eloquent about the Bible and public education. My name is Don Vino. I'm president of Midwest Christian Outreach, Inc. in Wonder Lake, Illinois, which produces the Unknown Webcast, and our senior researcher is Ron Hensel, who would introduce the sponsors of today's webcast, and here is Ronnie Baby.
Greetings from sunny Florida, where the palm tree came out, saw its shadow, and now we have 12 more months of summer. Our sponsor for this edition of the Unknown Webcast is Where's the Outrage? The game where the woke shall inherit the earth. Unless, of course, they're white males. Where's the outrage? Our regular legal disclaimer. Our guest on today's webcast, insert name here, that would be Joel Penton, has no connection whatsoever to any of the satirical content of the Unknown Webcast, hereafter known as the webcast, although we probably will not mention it again. This satirical content includes any and all commercials, end credits, puns, smart remarks, or anything else that might fall under the definition of satire. In the meantime, Midwest Christian Outreach Inc. bears no liability for or responsibility for anyone's opinions regarding this satirical content. Our regular notices: the opinions expressed in this webcast are ours and should be yours too. If this program really annoys you, or you enjoy it, either you want to inflict it on somebody else or you want to pass it on for their enjoyment to ensure your continued access, please go to midwestoutreach.org, click the yellow donate button, and contribute as you feel led. And as you do, never fear, this webcast is Y2K compliant. And don't forget to subscribe to us on your favorite video channels. And now we introduce our guest, Joel Penton. We have arranged for the fake applause from our fake studio audience. Thank you, just for you. So we have upgraded from fake applause, where I just held my fingers up and clapped like that. Greetings, Joel.
Well, thank you. Thanks for having me. This is fun.
Well,
so far,
you have been had.
Yes.
We're glad you agreed to partake on a few minutes' time with us. And before we get too far into this, it would be helpful for those who are tuning in to know, who is Joel Penton and why should we care? Now, as it turns out, you had played sports.
I did. I played some football back in the day. Now, I'm not sure I have good answers for why anyone should care about who I am.
You played for Ohio State, did you say? Or
I did. I played for the Ohio State University. That's right.
Well, your position was?
I played defensive tackle.
Okay. So he's somebody to be reckoned with. So if you're on the front line, you have to get past that guy.
Well, they would throw me in for short yardage situations. If they needed a body that they didn't mind if that got injured, then they'd say, that Penton kid, he'll take on a double team, and then we'll keep the other guys.
That's always encouraging, right? To know that.
Exactly.
So, yeah. Well, so do you feel like you're being double teamed in your current ministry?
Well, in this very moment, it kind of feels that way. As I look at the screen and I see that I am. The screen I'm looking at is kind of the arrangement. I'm on this side of the ball, and I've got these two offensive linemen or whatever coming right at me. I better stay low and hold on tight.
Blitz. So, anyways,
well, and this, you're not the first who said I'm offensive either. So
I was thinking though more in the area of your ministry. Does it feel sometimes like maybe you're triple teamed sometimes by the things that are coming at you?
I suppose so. Yeah, we're growing quickly as a ministry. There's maybe you could say it's easy to feel double teamed by internal and external challenges. There's all sorts of those, but it's a great joy to do what I do, and so I wouldn't trade it for any other job.
We should probably talk about what it is you do.
So because that's why people are really going to want to know about who he is and why that matters. It does matter a great deal. We live in a interesting time. In fact, I have a bit of a newspaper clipping that I want to share. This is going to take a second to do this. Here we go. Boom, boom, boom. Which says, and this is from USA Today about a month ago, having chaplains in schools is bad for students. Leave mental health care to professionals. I guess that's probably a typo. I'm hoping it is.
Probably.
And then they say, as clergy members, and this is written by Sherry Allen and Andy Stoker, we believe inserting chaplains in place of professional counselors into our schools is a grave threat to democracy and to the well-being of children across the state. The law violates a core tenet of American democracy, namely that state-sanctioned religion is constitutionally prohibited from public institutions. The Establishment Clause of the First Amendment states that the government cannot favor one religion over another, protecting every person's right to believe as they choose without fear of coercion and ensuring the separation between religion and the government. So, as we read that, what we find out is we should not have religion anywhere near public school students. What do you say?
Well, I can't comment very specifically on whether schools should hire chaplains, but I can speak about whether we should get Bible education and the gospel to public school students. And I would say very strongly, yes, we absolutely should. And we, in fact, we can. And the basis of our ministry, of what we do with Lifewise Academy, is we provide Bible education for public school students during school hours, which often sounds bizarre or impossible in 2023, especially after you read articles like that. People say Bible education, public schools, school hours, those three ingredients can't possibly go together.
Right.
However, the Supreme Court has spoken on this. In 1952, the Supreme Court ruled that public school students can be released from public school during school hours to receive Bible education, any religious instruction, honestly, if the program is off school property, privately funded, and students have parental permission. The Supreme Court ruled on this. Now 26 states have laws on the books specifically about it. Almost nobody knows about this, but that's, again, why our organization exists.
Yeah, I was a little surprised when I was kind of doing research, getting ready for this, and came across this, that in 1950, 13 states and 25 other states required public school reading. It was required in 13 states in 1950 and permitted in 25 other states. After several court cases went back and forth, reading in public schools had virtually vanished by the 1964 and 5 academic year. 1984 Equal Access Act passed by Congress gave students the right to gatherings for various activities, including Bible reading and discussions. And then in 1990 and again in 2001, this was reaffirmed. So you're right. I didn't know about that. I thought like Bible just banned from public education.
Well, they still wouldn't. There's a couple things to consider. One, there's a resurgence of sorts of Bible education, Bible as literature education in the public schools. And I've met with some of these individuals that are able to teach the Bible's literature, the Bible's history, that type of thing. However, it cannot be for devotional purposes. But what we do is very different. We teach the Bible during school hours, but not as part of the public school curriculum. So we are a nonprofit Christian ministry. Local community members will start a Lifewise Academy, and we take kids from the public school building, from public school property, teach them a Bible lesson. And we're able to have the gospel at the center of that. Every week we're talking about Jesus. We're talking devotionally. We're encouraging kids to repent of sin and believe the gospel and follow Christ. I mean, we're able to be very clear because it's separated from the school, and then we bring them back. And I'll often tell people that everyone has opinions of the separation of church and state, but at minimum, what we do, and the legal term is released time religious instruction. What we do is, in some sense, a very clear manifestation of the separation of church and state, because we're literally separating students from the state school. We're taking them out of the school building, teaching them the word of God, and then taking them back.
Wow.
So like how is the transportation arranged? I mean, you're not using school buses?
Well, we use a lot of school buses. There's one right behind me, a big red school bus. We now have a fleet of dozens and dozens of buses. Ideally, we're as close to the school as we can be in terms of facilities. If it's a church next door, well, then great. We'll walk students. Or sometimes it's a renovated home. Sometimes it's a brand new build. Or we're busing students. And so whether it's using a shuttle or a full-size school bus, which again, we have dozens of them now. They're all painted red. They say Lifewise on the side. And we'll take them to, again, it could be a church down the street, a YMCA, a community center. It really doesn't matter. We keep our standards high in terms of the facility, but ultimately a lot of different ones could be used for it.
So you're using your vehicles, not the school district's vehicles, and you have that very distinct kind of reddish color. So does this, how long have you been doing it?
Well, we just started in 2019. As the story goes, my hometown of Van Wert, Ohio, started a program in 2012 and saw an immediate impact. And their goal was to have 30% of kids in this public elementary school enroll. By the third year, they had 95% of the entire student body enrolled in this program.
Really?
Yes. So that was by 2015. 3 years after that, as they were getting ready to expand into the high school and middle school, they reached out to me. I had started a nonprofit Christian ministry in the Columbus, Ohio area, and it was growing and scaling. And so they engaged me to help answer the question, how can we have this amazing program using this model? And how come nobody else has heard of it? You'd think you'd have a program like this in every community coast to coast. And through that conversation, we concluded that what was really needed, there's so many barriers to entry. You basically have to start a private school to get one of these things off the ground. We said, well, what if we put all the tools in one place, develop a plug and play model that's replicable, that's, any community can do it without reinventing the wheel. With that idea, Lifewise was born, but we just launched our first two programs, first two schools in 2019.
That was 4 years ago. You said we just did it. It's like time flies, right? You're going on 5 years now. You're going on half a decade.
That's true. Yeah, I guess the idea was 2018. We launched our first two schools in 2019, but it's fairly short perhaps you'll consider it a short period of time when I tell you that today we're serving over 340 schools across 15 states.
See, that goes to the next question. Yeah.
Yeah, and we anticipate over 35,000 students enrolled this year.
What's a typical, you said that one school district, 90% of the kids are in it. What is that typical, or is that unusual, or what?
I think it's still unusual. That's high. We see different participation based on a few things. Number one, grade level. The elementary schools are going to have higher participation for a few very clear logistical reasons. The game changes at the middle school and high school level in terms of how classes are run, the weekly schedule. Also, rural communities, as of right now, still have higher participation than the suburban and the urban communities we work with. And then how long has the program been operational will determine as well how large the enrollment is. But, it's not the only school that has over 90%. We have a school in Northwest Ohio that's kind of a small city size as the city. The school itself has 1,000 students in it. And we have over 900 of them in the program.
Wow.
So I used to be a Christian school teacher for 8 years, I forget. The first thing I think about, and you kind of dealt with it without knowing it, I think, because my first concern would be going into a public school and introducing this program and then having kids up and leave to go in it would be the social dynamic that would create in the school, and the potential for the kids to become targets of harassment because they're in this program, depending on the district and the culture. And a lot of, I'm not saying it would always happen, but especially I think it would be a hard time for that to happen in a school where 90% of the kids are involved. In fact, maybe some parents might be worried, gee, how's my kid going to be treated for not being involved?
Sure.
Has that been a problem?
We haven't seen it as a problem. It's come up in conversation when people are voicing their own hesitations or possible problems, but we've not seen it be a problem. We have some schools that, based on where they are and based on their life of the program, there's just a few students in it. I've not heard of any issues with the kids being bullied or whatever it is. Of course, as Christians, to a degree, we want to encourage our students that it would be worth being bullied, to attend Bible class. And we certainly don't hear anything like that when we have a very high participation. And I've not heard reports of bullying the kids who don't participate.
Well, it could just be, when I say harassment, I'm trying to have a broad.
Sure.
Just everything from just being made fun of to, well, I wouldn't expect much worse than that, but it could happen.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, in our class, we're talking about things regularly like kindness and, responsibility and gratitude and the types of things that should be combating any type of, tendency toward harassment. It's theoretically possible, but ultimately when this comes up, I'll often share with people that anytime kids split into groups, there's opportunities for that. When one group goes to play kickball and the other group goes to swing on the swings, one group goes and joins the band, one group joins the football team. It is, I suppose, another opportunity for kids to split into different groups, but we don't get worried about that.
Another reason I think of it, not only because it just came into my mind, but also, if I were a person who had a natural or just my own personal bias against this sort of thing, that would be one of the first things I'd try to seize upon as an argument against it, even trying it. Yes. But you've been doing this for over 4 years now in, you say, 350 schools?
343 this year are confirmed.
343. So you're up to that. It took time to build up to that, I'm sure. But at the same time, that's a considerable track record. You probably could potentially have a lot of data on various questions that come up when you're trying to introduce it to a new district.
That's right. The data is very much accumulating. We just had an independent study conducted by a firm in Indianapolis that compared the schools that implemented Lifewise to thousands of similar schools across the nation. They found that when a school implements Lifewise, the overall attendance for the entire school actually rises by a significant amount, and in school and out of school suspensions go down, and to the point that, and I found this to be very remarkable, even though kids are being pulled out of school for 45 minutes to an hour a week, the net amount of class time actually increases just from the increased attendance as well as the decrease in suspensions. There ends up being more class time despite kids leaving for Lifewise.
Wow. So, and some of that increased attendance, it might be due to the fact that some of the kids just want to make sure they make their Lifewise class that day.
Oh, yes. Those numbers align with what we are hearing very regularly in terms of anecdotally. Kids love it. Kids want to make sure they come on the day that they have Lifewise. One of the things schools are really struggling with now is simply getting kids to show up for school, which maybe sounds crazy to those of us who went to school many years ago, but that's a real issue, and especially in the inner cities. And we've heard from the inner city schools that attendance is going up. The grades, like the day they have Lifewise, they're hitting their attendance goals as a school. So it's a big deal.
But the real question is, are you practicing pronoun hospitality with these kids? I mean, come on, that's really, and are you making sure they know that they have accessibility to condoms and things like that?
We don't cover those things. We tend to stick to we teach them the Bible, and
you've managed to avoid that, right? Okay.
So far.
As I listened to your statistics, something just struck me. Someone that we work with from time to time, we've had on our show, Vishal Mangawati, has a couple of books, and he's really quite adamant that just having people familiar with teaching the Bible transforms how they think about themselves and the world around them. He's got a couple of his books are like The Book That Made Your World, How the Bible Created the Soul of Western Civilization. This book changed everything, the Bible's amazing impact on our world. He's from India, he's a good scholar, and he's doing some interesting things with homeschool education and church school. He's really an advocate that every church should be a schooling facility for the families in your area from kindergarten through college. It's a pretty interesting concept. So what you're kind of demonstrating with the research you've just had done is it is changing how the students think about themselves and the institutions they're attending, right?
Yeah, that's exactly right. And this isn't surprising, this data, because there's been decades and decades of studies that have shown the connection between kids receiving Bible education and character improving, all sorts of risk factors going down, whether it's alcohol use, drug use, certain behaviors. There's connections that have been demonstrated with mental health improving, which is one of the things that's funny about that article you read, is that there are decades that show when a kid has even just, you could say, religion in their life, that their mental health really does improve. Their anxiety goes down and optimism goes up and all those types of things. And so, again, there's been mountains of studies on these of religion and the Bible in general. But yes, now we have accumulated some data, and we're seeing and able to demonstrate that our program in particular, which teaches the Bible, has these same positive effects.
Okay. Now, I asked you this before we went on the air. You don't take, now, by the way, let me back up. Because of the kind of ministry we are, and I explained this to you before, we're missionaries to cults and non-Christian religions. We also do quite a bit intersecting with the church and false teaching that may be coming into the church that pastors and elders need to be aware of. So, how do we determine on this kind of a program whether or not you are a likely candidate for us to pick on this week? So I did go through your website and read your statement of faith and those sorts of things, and you're pretty much right down the road with what we would consider Orthodox evangelicalism. That's an important thing. Now, you don't take denominational positions, really, right?
We don't. We try to avoid when we can. I mean, it's tough because even the decision of what would you consider a denominational issue, somebody has to kind of decide on where to draw those lines. But as best we can, we try to major on the majors, minor on the minors, recognizing our role in the body of Christ, that we aren't a church. We are a tool that churches and Christians can pick up and utilize in their broader, robust ministry. And so we're very intentional about, hey, there's certain things we're not going to teach on, not because they're not important, but because they're not our place. That's not our lane. And so things like baptism, obviously baptism is very important. But that's not going to be a thing that we teach kids about the specifics of mode of baptism or timing or that type of thing. We recognize it's our role to introduce kids to the Bible, to the gospel message, and urge them to believe and to then get connected and their families to get connected with a church where they can take all those many, many next steps.
Have you... I imagine that in the course of over 4 years, you've gotten some pushback, and maybe we could also talk later about lessons you've learned, but what about the pushback? What's it been like, and where's it come from? Any unexpected places?
Well, there's been some, but I will say this off the bat is there's been much less than we ever anticipated. If I were at the beginning of this, as we were pursuing it, I probably would have said, yes, I'm sure this will work in rural communities, but I bet as we get close to cities, it'll be really challenging. The inner city is going to be tough. The very affluent suburbs are going to be tough. And frankly, we've not seen that to be the case. The inner city schools are begging us to come and to expand.
Wow.
They're seeing the benefit. The suburban
Really?
communities, there's been maybe a little bit of pushback from time to time, but for the most part, it's so clear legally. In fact, I should probably back up and tell the whole story. I will eventually, but our attorney general just sent out a letter to all the schools about release time, and it was instigated in part because of the growth of Lifewise. And he pointed out that this is not new and this is not controversial. The law is just so clear and precedent is so clear that nobody needs to get upset about this. It's totally optional.
He must have sent the letter out for a reason. What did he, or is it just something he felt like doing on that particular day? I mean, was he responding to something?
Yes. So now I'll be able to back up and tell the story. I should have approached it differently to start at the beginning. Okay. His letter was triggered in part because there was a letter, and this would be some of the pushback we've gotten from the Freedom from Religion Foundation, our friends at that, I believe it's Wisconsin-based atheistic lobbying group, really, or I don't know what you'd call the group, activists group. And they had sent a letter. This is great. The Freedom from Religion Foundation sent a letter to every single superintendent in the state of Ohio, having recognized the rapid growth of Lifewise. We will be in more than a quarter of all Ohio school districts in the next year. And they sent out this letter just urging schools and challenging schools to not work with us. And they didn't really give any real reason. Other than saying, encouraging them that you don't have to work with Lifewise. Just be aware that you're not legally obligated. And they outlined a few things, concerns they might have, but it really there wasn't much to it. Of course, we were asked to comment publicly on this, and we publicly thanked the Freedom from Religion Foundation for investing their time and money to spread the word about Lifewise.
That was not being snarky, was it?
Maybe a little snark, maybe just a little. But our greatest challenge is that not enough people know about us, so we're happy that they would do that.
Yeah, and publicity is good publicity, right?
That's exactly right. Well, the Attorney General heard about all this, and he thought, I guess he didn't like this out-of-state activist group sending letters to all of our superintendents, and so he decided to send his own letter, and so that was kind of his Freedom from Religion Foundation shot block by our Attorney General, and it was great. It was great.
Let's get as many athletic metaphors into this discussion as we possibly can. And you can borrow from basketball, which you probably played at one point, but so yeah. I mean, did you start in a rural area and then move to suburbs and cities, or where was the first test run that you did this program?
Sure. Yeah, the program that inspired the start of Lifewise was in my hometown of Van Wert, Ohio, which is, you could say, a rural, small town community. And then our first 2 years of launches. So we launched 2 schools in 2019. Those were in rural communities. Then in 2020, amidst the pandemic, as a lot of schools were shutting down, we launched into 3 additional schools in the fall of 2020. And those were all rural communities. But we had made it a very high priority, even as all that was happening, to be intentional about working here in the Columbus, Ohio area, both the inner city and the suburban areas. And so then in the fall of 2021, we were able to launch in several of the urban and suburban communities.
So that the program in Van Werten, is it still going on with the original people who are doing it? Or is Lifewise is Lifewise becoming like the Microsoft of this idea, and you're just kind of devouring up all these other ones? Well, there's only one other one that I know of so far, and it's after you guys. It's that one that you said it was inspired Lifewise. Is it still going?
It did inspire the start. It is a Lifewise Academy now. What happened was the group in my hometown asked me to engage to kind of help solve this riddle. How can we have this great program that other communities don't have? My response to them was, somebody really needs to put it in a box and make it plug and play, make it replicable. and they said, okay, we think you should do that. And I said, okay, well, I'm happy to do it. How about you guys be our first, like you make these changes? And they said, no, we're going to keep doing what we're doing. We invite you to go do that. And if it's working several months down the road, we'll join you. And so about 6 months into the launch of Lifewise, so the first official Lifewise was a different school in Northwest Ohio. But then just a few months later, my hometown group became a Lifewise Academy as well.
Signed up. Okay.
Well, this is interesting, and we're going to go to a different topic just momentarily.
Sure.
It's happening on universities like around all over the place because they have a whole different view of life. It's a different worldview, and they have different issues.
Because because they didn't have Lifewise to.
They probably so.
Yeah, right.
Now you're getting it. You're getting it.
So it's Thanksgiving's coming up, right, Don?
It is.
And so there's some questions we have, and that is to begin with, have traditional family dinners become unbearably tedious? Do you wonder when someone will invent a board game that distracts others from your privilege? Do you want to be part of something bigger than yourself while remaining the center of your universe? Well, then we have just what you're looking for. Where's the Outrage? The game where the woke shall inherit the earth, unless, of course, they're white males. In Where's the Outrage, there are no unfair inequality-promoting dice. The rules for taking turns are simple. Each player gets points for being in an oppressed group, and then turns are taken in the order of the most part. Next, you choose a bankroller, also known as the game's George Soros. The George Soros distributes the game cards. And now you're ready to play. Each player chooses a game piece and puts it in the forward space. And now we start with Briannold, who is an African-American, Native American, non-binary, transgendered, former female, whose pronouns are Marx, Engels, and Lenin. And so Briannold gets to make the first move. Briannold chooses the Christian-owned bakery, where Briannold picks a free lawyer's card and then occupies the space. And now Briannold is free to make another move and goes down to the free speech zone, where Briannold just blows off those fascist white supremacists and their stupid free speech by taking an entitlements card. And the fun of being the center of your universe is just beginning to get real purpose back into your life. While taking it away from others with Where's the Outrage, the game where the woke shall inherit the earth, unless, of course, they are white males. So, you really need something to do this holiday season to avoid all of the contentiousness that people are having at Thanksgiving meals. Why not just play Where's the Outrage?
There you go. You go. So that's what makes this program, viewers, particularly interesting to me, is we're seeing a lot of this coming down into public education. It has, in fact, we've written a lot on this over the last 30 years. The whole idea of transforming culture through the public institutions and moving them more toward sort of Marxism is sort of at odds with what you're doing in public education. Have you run into issues with that?
Well, only to the degree that there are many in, maybe I won't even use the word many. There are some in public education, as within any industry, that have, ideologies that would be contrary to Scripture, and they tend to at times rear their heads when they hear Scripture is going to be taught to children. They'll kind of speak up and they'll reveal themselves because they'll put forth some reasons why why this shouldn't happen, and they never tend to be good reasons, because the truth is they have a bigoted point of view that is simply anti-religious and anti-Bible without any good reasons, and it's driven by a certain ideology. And so every now and then we'll bump into those people. I'm going to be honest, though. I think that's the pretty vocal, but small minority. I mean, we're pretty welcomed when we introduce the concept of Lifewise in communities. There might be a squeaky wheel here and there, but for the most part, it's people who we bump into people who have felt like they couldn't do anything, have felt like they didn't have tools in their toolbox to stop some of the negative, momentum in certain ways. And then they hear that you can do this and they get excited. And so we're talking school board members, we're talking superintendents, principals, parents. They see this is what we hear often is, look at this, finally something we can be for, or finally an opportunity to go on offense. It feels like we're playing defense so much. Here's something that we can get behind.
When I hear this, and I hear it as someone who's actually worked with people in Christian education, and I've worked in much lesser extent, mostly as a substitute in public education, I have to ask myself, is Joel Penton basically a glass half full or a glass half empty kind of guy? Because I'm thinking you must have maybe, is it possible that some of the resistance you have encountered would have really had a bigger impact on someone who's maybe less optimistic about things, that you've been able with your personality to say, or has it really been that easy? Because sometimes you talk about a very vocal minority. Have these been teachers?
Well, every now and then there are some teachers that will have some resistance, and they're often mainly concerned about how's the schedule going to work? Am I going to be giving up time with my kids? That type of thing. I will say I'm an optimistic person.
Right. Well, I was thinking that you are.
Yeah, and I'm a problem solver. I'm an entrepreneur in many ways. I mean, I'm one who starts organizations, and so what do they say that in the book E-Myth? The opening kind of quote is that some people, everything is either a blessing or a curse. To the warrior, everything is a challenge. And perhaps as a former athlete, I feel like that's probably how I live each day, is that everything is a new challenge. And if it is a blessing, well, now it's a challenge. How are we going to best utilize this opportunity? If there's some sort of resistance, okay, now it's its own challenge. But there's certainly has never been enough resistance or challenge that has been discouraging.
So I find that's true. By virtue of what we do as a ministry, I hang around, as you would guess, with a lot of non-believers, a whole variety of worldviews. My wife says I have this kind of unique ability to sit across the table from somebody and kind of do the old country farmer, well, son, you're going to hell. And she says, they keep talking to you. I don't understand how that works.
Yeah.
Because it kind of just diffuses the anger usually to get us to the place where we talk about.
I worked with a school principal who was kind of like that. People, parents would come in irate, screaming at the top of their lungs. Sue would pull them in the office, close the door. You'd hear a little bit of yelling, then it would temper down. And then about 20 minutes later, they all both come out smiling, hugging each other, And there is this thing about the educational environment that brings out passions in people. Sure. All kinds of people, not just the parents,
right,
but the teachers, the administrators. They get passionate if they have a certain point of view. And, it seems, I can't imagine that there have been no school board meetings where at least this was being considered, where somebody didn't get pretty passionate.
Oh, there have been. Yeah, I don't want to misrepresent. There sure have been. In fact, we now have heard of Lifewise. If Lifewise is on the agenda, there's been a few that have been the highest attended school board meeting ever.
You get people involved, students and parents.
That's right. Yeah, and often the Lifewise crew will all wear their red Lifewise T-shirts, and they'll all speak. And we coach people to speak very politely and very, kindly. And then we've had school boards where there's been a different group that has been wearing, multicolored clothing.
Really? How surprising.
Oftentimes multicolored hair, and, shouting. But but I still find them to be the minority, meaning
Right.
when you hear the level-headed adult speak in the room, it just seems very clear. There's a small group of really wound up people,
Tightly wound, yes.
and then there's and it has, and again, it hasn't gone perfectly every time. There have been school boards that have voted to not allow Lifewise in their community. Like, it has happened. There have been superintendents that have, but our success rate is over 90% at this point, meaning once we have a logistical plan and we sit down with the school, more than 90% of the time we're starting a program.
Okay, so what's the process? Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I think you were going to ask the same question I am. So let's go from here's what it is and here's the success that it has had. How do you go from kind of the here's the sales pitch to the rubber meets the road? How does this get implemented and how does it work? And what does the Bible studies, if you will, look like?
Sure. Well, yeah, we can think of how to get it going, and then what does that, when it's up and running, what exactly does it look like? So we've developed it after several years of working it out, a simple 10-step process to start a Lifewise in a particular community. It has kind of 3 phases. First, we establish there's adequate interest in the community to launch and sustain a program. Then we go into a planning phase. That's when we talk to the school. And then we go into an implementation phase. But that interest phase, the first 3 steps of our 10-step process, starts with what we call a community interest list. Basically, we want to see 50 signatures from the community, a petition, essentially, a signature campaign from the community of people saying, yes, we want this in our community. Because to pull it off, it really does take a lot. And when someone hears and thinks about what it takes to pull it off, they think, I can't do that alone. And we say, that's right, you need 49 friends. And so we collect 50 signatures, and that's done through our website. If you go to lifewise.org, you can find any school district in the nation, and you can add your name to the list, and you can send that link and to 49 friends, and you can collect signatures. And then it moves through the process of, okay, we got 50 signatures. Now let's have a meeting. Now let's raise just a little bit of money to show their skin in the game. Now we'll form a steering committee. That steering committee meets with a member of our staff and drafts a plan. That plan is taken to the school. The school then can approve that plan. Once they approve it, now we'll find a director, we'll find a board, we'll train them, and we will implement the plan. So that's kind of how it all gets going. There's more information about that on our website, lifewise.org. Once the school is up and running, what does it look like? Well, this may be more information than you want, but we talk about the 5 L's of Lifewise Academy: leadership, location, logistics, loot, and language. And so you gotta, that's right, that's my favorite one. Leadership, you gotta have the right people in place. So you're talking director, board, teachers, volunteers. Location, that's where you're talking facility and transportation. Logistics, there's your scheduling, your attendance, your policies, coordinating with the school. Loot, of course, is fundraising and finance. And then language is communication with your various audiences in terms of parents and students and the school and donors and that type of thing. And the classes themselves, we teach students through the entire Bible over the course of 5 years is our typical path. So kids start in 1st grade in Genesis. By the time they're done in 5th grade, they've finished with Revelation. We have a licensing agreement with the Gospel Project, which each lesson has a 3-fold focus: head, heart, and hands. We talk about head, what is the information on the page? What does the Bible story say? Heart, we ask the question, how does this story or this passage connect to the bigger picture story of the gospel? How is Jesus the hero of every story? And then hands, if we rightly understand the gospel in this context, how does it transform our character? How does it transform what we do? And so kids get that through elementary school. We have similar but modified classes at the middle school and high school level as well.
So the curriculum was, was it built completely in-house, or it sounds like you purchased it or leased it or something like that?
Yeah, we've licensed it. So The Gospel Project is a Sunday school curriculum that is a Lifeway publishing product. Under our arrangement with them, we're able to make modifications. And so, for example, the Sunday school curriculum assumes a 52-week calendar because there's 52 weeks in the year, but we just have the school year. And so there's some modifications that have been made for the scheduling, especially also for the uniqueness of it being during the school day and the slightly different setting, and some branding issues.
And how about some denominational issues? I mean, Lifeway is Southern Baptist, right?
Yeah. Now they've done a pretty good job of making it kind of not necessarily Southern Baptist. In some of their, the one piece would probably be baptism. But they want to make that curriculum available to a large breadth of churches. In fact, there's a Presbyterian church I know of that uses the Gospel Project because they've done a pretty good job of that.
Okay. Well, this is kind of exciting. I hope, it might not show. I might not be jumping out of my seat, but, this is because I'm an old guy.
Well, you're trying to think of your next joke. That's
Yeah. Well, that too.
So, all right. So there's the 5 elements to get started, the 5 L's.
Well, that'd be once it's up and running. You got the 10 steps to get started. 10 steps gets you there, and then 5 L's keeps you going.
Well, one of the logistical issues is, it sounds like the school has to kind of modify its schedule to accommodate this some way. Does it?
It doesn't have to, but it can. We've identified about 8 different ways schools have made it work. Some of them involve modifying the schedule. Some of them don't. One way that they wouldn't is, for example, if kids have a library time that is not a graded time, they could just simply opt out of library and stop in to do their book checking out, before or after school. There's oftentimes a lunch recess combo that we utilize, and kids will pick up a sacked lunch on their way out of school, is one other option. Some schools already have a free period that has been scheduled in for what kind of a study hall, an intervention time. Yeah, that type of thing. It varies from school to school. That's where it's a little more art than science. We have now hundreds of examples, but every school building's a bit different.
So, is there homework? That's the question. I mean, some parents are concerned about that. Don't want to put any more load. I don't want my kid taking time away from, STEM to do Bible.
Sure. No, there's no homework, and there's no tests. That's one of the things we often hear from parents that they like so much about it is that school has very much become very much about testing and tests, and there's a certain amount of pressure, which a certain amount is good, right? But we hear that a lot, that they love that the kids can just be there to soak it in.
I bet you that helps to motivate the kids to be there too.
Sure.
It's a time when they're engaged. It's a time when they're stimulated, but it's not like, oh man, I got to get ready for this. I got to get the homework done. And I missed, studying for it. I'm going to be in trouble. I think we're benefiting from a perfect storm of factors, right? Like kids are gonna love this, that they get to leave school, they get to ride on the fun red bus, they get to the fun red bus.
Yeah, they get to do some, it's interesting activities. Not only that, it's meaningful content. Like kids aren't dumb. They know that this is stuff, we're talking about issues that are on a whole level they're qualitatively different than what they're normally talking about. They're learning about triangles and squares, and that's all very important. But here they're talking about the meaning of life.
Right. Especially at the middle school level, that's when the kids really start asking questions.
Right.
That's right. Right.
Yeah. The other thing I think about is, it would just be so wonderful and amazing if you could get this into every type of school district and eventually every school district in the country. But I'm not sure you want to be in every school in the Chicago school district right now. And I'm just saying, I'm not sure you have some challenges that you don't face. in rural or suburban areas, or even in many urban areas. Are you, by the way, in any real like tough urban areas yet?
Columbus, Ohio is not the largest city. It is one of the largest in Ohio, and it does have some rough areas. And we are serving an elementary school in the highest crime rate neighborhood in Columbus, Ohio. And so I don't think at this point our team would shy away from any area. In fact, we would be anxious and excited if
because you're going to have an impact.
Yeah, and it's about finding local people, though. That's like you could have on your show, or you could see a video on our website of Vincent Coleman, who heads up the city, what we call Lifewise citywide effort here in Columbus. He was he was raised in Columbus, Ohio, graduate of Columbus City Schools, was a Columbus City Schools middle school principal before joining staff with Lifewise Academy. And so he's an elder at his church, which is in the city. He has all the relationships in the church world, in the school world, in the community. And if we have somebody like that in Chicago, then we're ready to go, right? But that's what it takes.
Wow. So that's a good test case, Columbus. That is a very good, getting your toe in the pond sort of thing.
How many times a week does this happen, or does that vary depending on which age group classes, for example, are going to it? How does that work?
Yeah, almost without exception, every student receives one class per week. And so in the same way kids would get art class is usually once a week. They would have at some point an opportunity to have Lifewise, their Bible class, once a week. And it's usually on a rotation. And so I told you about the school that has 900 students out of 1,000. The way theirs works is that 5 times a day, 5 days a week, a 72 passenger big red bus pulls up to the school, and 2 classrooms at a time get on the bus. They go down the road less than a mile to the YMCA, have their Bible class in 2 separate rooms, get back on the bus, come back, pick up another group. And it's on a rotation so that 2 classes at a time can receive a class and everybody gets it once.
Wow. Now, in my previous career before education, I was in higher ed fundraising at Wheaton College. And I did the last segment of that, I did grant proposal writing. And I was told, don't even bother to go to certain foundations. There were a list of them that were huge donors to education, but they kind of stopped being donors to higher ed after the A Nation at Risk report came out during the Reagan administration. They shifted all their funding to K through 12. So I'm going through this in my head. I'm thinking, okay, where does your loot come from? You mentioned the loot. In fundraising, just a general principle is 90% of the money comes from 10% of the donors.
That's right.
So I'm assuming you've got those lined up, and but you're trying to get that other 10% from the 90% of people like me and Don. We, by the way, are not deep pockets. I just want you to know. So what is fundraising like for you guys, and how's it going?
Well, it's challenging in the sense that we have a very large task to do, and therefore we have a lot of money we need to raise. We're talking very seriously now about. You said it'd be great to see this in every school district, and that's what we talk about. We talk about the 13,000 school districts, the 90,000 school buildings, the 50 million public school students, and if we're really going to reach them, we need to raise a ton of money. And so that's a challenge, but I would say it's going really well in the sense that the Lord has provided every step of the way, and God's people are stepping up in a big way. What we're finding is that when Lifewise is started in a community, the typical challenge is not the fundraising. That the Lord has his people in that town that when they simply hear that, oh wait, we can teach the Bible to our public school students during school hours, and that the only obstacle is writing a check. I mean, people are stepping up in a big way. Many of them had lost hope, and they're thinking, again, here's a way we can go on offense. Here's something I can get behind. And
Well,
so,
it sounds like your biggest expenses are people and buses right now. Is that true?
well, certainly people. That is, we like to have a paid director in a community if it's a decent sized program. We like to see part-time paid teachers as well for the sustainability of the program. And that's going to be the biggest piece of the pie. There are transportation costs, but once you have the one-time cost of a bus, it's not that expensive.
Right. Well, I mean, you don't have any brick and mortar.
Some communities do. We have many, I guess you'd say, communities, not most, but some that will build a building. I mean, they'll take it.
Does Lifeway own it, or does
no? The Lifewise does not. So we walk. Yeah, we walk. Certainly not Lifeway, but no, we walk communities through the process of starting a local 501c3 if they're going to own real estate. If they're not going to own a building, everything operationally is just run through Lifewise. It's one of the services we provide is the infrastructure. But if there's going to be real estate, then everybody agrees, let's have it owned locally.
And it's owned by that. It's not in any way owned by Lifewise at that point. It's owned by them.
That's right.
So maybe, because what I was thinking of is this thing gets bigger and bigger, you might find more and more of your job is just fundraising, because presidents of colleges to the universities today, that's pretty much like 90% of their schedule sometimes. But I'm not sure that's going to happen with you.
Well, I 90% would be a bit high, but from going into ministry over 15 years ago, and being entrepreneurial as a person, I'm willing to do whatever it takes for the mission. If I need to raise money, I'll raise money. If I need to build a website, I'll build a website. I don't really care on one level. Entrepreneurs are kind of like that, right? They do whatever it takes to get the job done.
Don's laughing. He was and still is an entrepreneur. So,
give us another challenge. It makes us happy.
That's right. That's exactly right.
Well, this is amazing. I mean, this is like been totally under the radar.
That's right.
I didn't hear about you.
Well, I think it is for most. That's what intrigued me, because I looked at this. I spent a couple of weeks just kind of, going around their website, looking at it, looking up different things. And I went, we want to have this guy on here because I've said this several times. We're missionaries to cults and non-Christian religions. My heart is, how do we get out in the area, the neighborhood, the whatever, with the ability to talk about the gospel to anybody who will listen in a sort of non-threatening way. We want to give the hard, bad news to give them the good news. But in order to do that, you have to have a hearing. And I just don't find in general the churches are effective at doing that. It doesn't mean they don't want to. I just don't think they're effective. You're offering them another way to engage those in the schools, the impressionable years, with the gospel. And that's an exciting thing.
That's the name of the game. I mean, people, it's interesting that your ministry is to the cults and non-Christians, and that sometimes when we're talking to schools and even Christian school board members, they'll say, well, if we allow this, we're going to have to allow it if a Muslim group or a cult group or an atheistic group or a Satan club or whatever. And we are very quick to say, yes, and go ahead and let them. Like, we are not afraid of competition. Right. We know that the gospel is true. We're confident in the gospel. The only thing that we are afraid of, and maybe afraid isn't the right word, would be silence on the gospel. Right. In the marketplace of ideas, the gospel wins. And so the only thing we want to avoid is silence.
Right. That's good. So, all right. So, your contact information, your website, and all that is in the description. But for those who are not quick to want to go and look that stuff up, what is your website address? Because that's simple.
Yes. Yeah, that's lifewise.org, lifewise.org.
And pretty much everything they need to know to at least think about getting started is there. I like the idea of you need 49 friends, and we've provided the way for you to do that, so you don't have to go knocking door to door. You could just send an email link.
That's exactly right. And we have people that will, in a matter of hours, maybe some even in a matter of minutes, are able to collect that because of technology now. You can email, you can text, you can share it on Facebook. And again, your response has been fairly typical in that I've heard you say, this is exciting. I had no idea about this. This is exciting.
It blows me away. I mean, as someone, I'm now, I taught in Christian schools. I thought I was probably going to get into secular high school, public high school, but I ended up in a Christian middle school. And as time has gone on, I've seen more and more the need for, homeschooling, frankly, as the solution for most parents. But I'm very sensitive to the other side, which says, well, we don't want to abandon the public schools.
Right.
Well, here we're showing that I have a place to point to now to say 350 school districts and growing, and the public schools are not being abandoned. Thankfully, thanks to you guys, I can say that now. Right. And I want more people to find out about this. I want everybody to find out about this. So, Don, what are we going to do to make that happen?
Well, we're going to probably revisit this again in the future if he's willing to come back, now that he kind of knows who we are.
Now he knows us, so I think the chances have gone down. So,
yeah, well, that's the key. So, and Joel, we're going to go out in a moment, but I'd like you to hang on if you can for about 2 minutes after we're done.
Sure.
That'd be great.
Ron, would you waltz us out of here, baby?
Yes, let's give credit to whom credit is due. Our resident cult leader profiler is Neil before me. Our wardrobe manager is See How It Fits You. Culinary services are provided by Chef Ham and Cheese. Our tinfoil hat provisioner is Just In Case. Jehovah's Witnesses coverage comes from Armageddon. And D. Opposer, our Mormon archives manager, is Polly Gummas. Our liberal denominations bureau chief is Lucy Goosey. Our transgender issues coverage comes from Ben Hur. Special correspondent for cults based on the Hindenburg disaster and flying turkeys, Ode to Humanity. Our fact-checking supervisor is Yoleg Pulling. Technical assistance comes through Murky Research. Our legal advisors are at the law firm of Dewey, Cheatham & Howe. Grievance resolution director is Giovanna Pisami. Our director of privacy assurance is wiretapping, and original idea sourcing comes from Drew A. Blank. The Unknown Webcast is a production of Midwest Christian Outreach, Inc. in cooperation with Emergency Manicure Productions, both of whom are solely responsible for this content, although you will never be able to prove that in a court of law.
Never happened
yet. So, thank you, Joel.
See everyone out there next week when we'll be doing something else new and exciting. Doreen Virch is with us next week.
Oh, cool. Great.
So that'll be good.